What's up, everyone? Today I wanted to talk a little bit about working remotely and the challenges that it brings. So, as someone myself who's worked remotely now for the last 4 to 5 years, I've been through quite a few of the ups and downs that come with it, and I wanted to just share with you my experiences and what I think the pros and the cons of it are. Obviously, the biggest pro of working remotely is that you have freedom to work where you want. And this really is great, and it kind of does depend on your lifestyle. So, when I first went remote, I was traveling a lot and working wherever I wanted. It just worked out as the perfect solution for me at the time. And yeah, I mean, we were able to move all over. We went to Australia for a bit, and being flexible on that was just great, and it worked well for my lifestyle. But if you are rooted and you're making the change from a full-time job where you're traveling into the office every day, the biggest thing that you're going to notice from it is you no longer have to do a commute. And this is, in the UK, if you're living in somewhere like London, sometimes you're commuting an hour a day, possibly an hour to work and then an hour back. And this time adds up. Over a week, you're looking at 10 hours if you're working 5 days a week, lost, to the sitting on the tube or in the car or however you get to work. So immediately you're making up 10 hours a week. And that's personal time that you can do with whatever you want, which is amazing. When you first go remote from having a commute like that, it's incredible. I know people that have sort of, they're suddenly home at 6 p.m. in the evening instead of 7 or 8 in some cases, and it's like, well, I don't know what do I do now? And it's like, I've got all this time. It's amazing. So that's really cool. From my experience, I actually find that I'm more productive working remotely. Some people have different experiences with this, but just from my own, the way I like to work, I find I'm more productive. I find that I like to get up early and get on straight away. And then in the afternoon, maybe I take a slightly longer break, and then I come back and work a little bit more and work a bit later into the evening. So for me, I just find that those hours where I'm sat at the desk sat at the desk working are a lot more productive because I have the flexibility to work when I want and where I want. So yeah, I mean, some people prefer the more structured 9 to 5, but for me personally, I find that I'm more productive where I have complete flexibility over the times that I can work. I actually also find that it's a lot easier to eat healthy when you're working remotely, working from home. Mainly because if you're working in the city or working at the office and you just get into bad habits, you don't take your lunch in every day, or it's a big effort quite often to make your lunch, to go in, and so you end up walking out of the office at lunchtime and just picking up something, spend more money, and yeah, it's just not as healthy in my experience. So working from home, being remote, I have complete control over my diet and what I'm eating. I also find that I'm now healthier as a result, and I have more energy to work. So obviously there's cons, and one of the main ones that I find is loneliness, and it is a real thing. You do get lonely, but there are ways you can circumvent against this. I'd highly recommend that you go into a co-working space. It also depends on how the company you're working for is set up. If they're set up for remote working, then you might circumvent some of this loneliness through team communication. Again, it depends on. I've worked for some companies that are not at all prepared for working remotely. They just want to hire you in to do a job and that's it. Others are fully remote teams, and this is more and more common these days. And when you do find these teams, they're usually well prepared. They have regular team meetups via Zoom or Hangouts or Skype. So yeah, it really depends on how the team is set up, and it can be done well, it can be done badly, but yeah, it can depend. I also find actually when I first went remote, it was easier than it is now to get work, even though there's more resources online. There's a lot of job boards now, and and various other ways of, and, you know, like more and more companies that are adopting remote work, I actually find it harder now than I did to find remote work. I'm not entirely sure why that is. Perhaps just because there's more competition now for remote jobs, or perhaps now I'm looking for less junior level roles than I was back then. I'm now a senior level developer, so I look for higher responsibility jobs, and there's less of those around. Or perhaps those types of roles, I find people more companies want those types of guys to be sort of on site a lot more, so it's a little bit more difficult. But in general, I do find it can be a bit more challenging if you're moving around a lot and you're not making connections, you're not putting down roots, and you're not networking very well. Then getting remote work can be really tough. So in my experience, the best way is if you're working with a team and you have good connections anyway, and then you go remote through your existing connections, you can normally make it work. And normally, using those connections that you have, you can find more remote work from there. So a lot of the time, remote workers tend to know other remote workers. Remote teams tend to know other remote teams. So if you get in with some of them over time, you can build up your network. But it does take time. It does take effort. So yeah, that's one of the cons from my point of view. But overall, the pros, do outweigh the cons of working remotely. I feel like in the next few years, maybe for the next 5 years or so, we're just going to be seeing so much more remote working happening, especially within our industry, within the tech industry. It does require a buy-in, I think, from the companies that will be adopting remote work. I think pretty much everyone has to buy into the philosophy of we're working remotely. So, you know, like then you can have maybe Slack rooms where people can just drop in and say, look, I'm going to have a coffee. Do you want to just go and chat? So that's the sort of thing that you miss out on when you're working remotely. You don't just like walk to the coffee machine and then bump into someone and have a random conversation. That doesn't happen because you're working at home. So I quite like, you know, I've worked with teams before where we've done stuff like that. We've had a Slack room where it's like, oh, I'm just having a coffee. Does anyone want to chat? And then, you know, whoever's free is like, okay, yeah, sounds good. So stuff like that, you know, it does require the companies to buy into it. I do see this happening more and in the future. And I do think long term, that's kind of where we're going to go with the internet just, you know, being what it is now and technology advancing the way it is. So yeah, I mean, whether you're working remotely now or not, I expect if you work in technology, at some point you're going to have some experience with it. And I hope this will be useful for anyone who's wondering about the pros and the cons. This, of course, is just my personal experience. Others may have had different ones, but I hope it's been useful for you anyway. So that's it from me anyway. Chat to you guys later.